The following podcast contains coarse language and subject matter people might find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. Life after death will always be an obsession of humankind. The only way to tell what happens to us when we die is when the dead can tell us. Ouija boards have been a tool in the world of contacting those who are in spirit form. The first mention of automatic writing dates back to 1100 AD China during the Song Dynasty, where the dead would guide the living's meditating hands to deliver messages on paper. Boards were then created and have been occupying most home parlors since 1809. Christianity warns of the possibility of possession, while the occult say it can be a tool of positive transformation. No matter what side you reside on, it's a door, and the unexperienced hand has no control over what can enter it. So you may think twice about using one, especially after this story. Welcome to the world beyond the veil. This is Geist. Teenagers playing with Ouija boards. It's about as common as a cold. In 2014, Nori and her two friends decided they were going to give it a try at a sleepover. It was just a few girls having innocent fun, so what could go wrong? Well, everything did.
I was originally friends with Sarah. Me and Sarah shared kind of the same friend group and had been friends since, I think, like halfway through freshman year of high school. And so I met Bridget through Sarah because Sarah and Bridget were best friends. And so by proxy kind of became friends with Bridget. Me and these two friends had a sort of tumultuous kind of friendship. It was pretty toxic, I guess. Bridget was kind of like very much trying to be popular and cool and kind of just a little bit of a loose cannon. Sarah was really the opposite, like very, very, very quiet. Me and Sarah got along and we kind of bonded over nerdy shit like musical theater and vocal and stuff like that. And Bridget was the complete opposite of that, right? Like there was definitely a power dynamic, And Bridget was at the top of that hierarchy and it was me and Sarah. When things got bad and rocky, this Ouija board obsession that we kind of cultivated in our little friend group kept us kind of together as friends. It really, and I think that's what was so dangerous about it, I guess we thought it was cool at first. We thought it was spooky and esoteric and interesting. And, there was definitely a lack of respect. In the beginning, we started hanging out in the September, I think, of 10th grade that this story happens. And so we got pretty close pretty fast. And I didn't know much about Bridget really at all when the first Ouija board seance happened.
The night these three girls first started to experiment with the Ouija board did not leave them disappointed.
The first time we ever did it was at Sarah's birthday. She was having a kind of a birthday sleepover. So it was me, Sarah, and Bridget. And we all went to Sarah's house, and her birthday was in October. So we're, feeling the Halloween vibes. And I guess the initial plan of the night was that we were going to hang out, watch a movie, or go to the movies, I think, and maybe try to sneak a beer or something like that, and then just fall asleep. We come back to Sarah's house, and Sarah and Bridget say to me that they have this idea, that it's a spooky idea. And I'm like, okay, so what's up? What do you guys want to do? And they tell me that they want to do a Ouija board. And I think to myself, this sounds really stupid, but it could be really fun. So I was familiar, and I knew that you had to kind of operate with a level of respect when opening those channels or doors. So I was timid and I was afraid, but I guess I got caught up and I thought it would be fun because, I don't know, it was almost Halloween and what could go wrong in my head?
Nori, Sarah, and Bridget create a homemade Ouija board out of a pizza box. They light candles and use a shot glass for the planchette. A planchette is the portion of the board you lay your fingers on and allow the spirits to channel through you and guide the planchette to letters on the board to spell out a message.
So we make this Ouija board. Sarah came from like a very religious family. Her grandmother was extremely religious. Like in her grandmother's bedroom, I remember there was crosses all over the walls and just like very like ornamental. We were like afraid because her family was so religious that we had opened the closet kind of halfway in the closet doing it. And we had lit the candles in the closet in a way that if somebody was to walk in, they wouldn't exactly see what we were doing.
They make contact with a spirit.
We start doing the Ouija board and the planchette moves to hello. I guess I had the experience or wherewithal or understanding, so to speak, to ask the board if it was a good spirit or a negative spirit. It goes to yes initially. A spirit comes through that claims to be named Bridget. Me and Bridget and Sarah think to ourselves, well, that's strange because I guess one of our friends has the same name as this spirit. We asked if it was somehow connected to Bridget or if it was Bridget's like spirit guide, and the board went to yes. We start thinking, well, that's interesting. There must be like some sort of information it can provide us if it's saying that it's Bridget's spirit guide. And we begin to ask the board questions. And I remember asking if the spirit guide, Bridget, knew anything about Bridget's life that we didn't know or things that were going to happen in the future. And the board went to yes. And when we tried to clarify those things, and I think at the time Bridget was hoping to hear an answer about something to do with a dance competition or something that she had coming up, the planchette went to random letters and then immediately went to goodbye. So it was very weird, but Bridget was obviously super, intrigued and like wanted to keep trying to get back Bridget, the spirit guide. We kind of all sat there like, well, that was weird. I guess let's try again and see what else comes through. We do it again. It goes to hello. Ask if it's a good spirit. And there's a pause. And I remember it started going to no, stopped, and went to yes. The energy in the room suddenly felt so heavy. Like it felt like something was just like pushing me down. Just this energy leech entered the space. And it was so gross. And all of us felt it. And so we ask, what is your name? And the planchette moves between two letters, back and forth, and gets faster and faster and faster and faster to the point that we can barely keep our fingers on the planchette. It's moving so fast. The shot glass knocks over, and suddenly there's like a bang at the door. And we're like, what the hell is going on? So we blow out the candles. We're really, really freaked out. And at this point, Bridget and Sarah specifically are looking at each other and they're freaking out. Sarah opens the door, and it's Sarah's grandmother. And she asks us what we were doing. At this point, me and Bridget are like fumbling with all the stuff to hide it away so it doesn't look like we've been doing anything. Sarah says, we were just like hanging out, eating pizza, like chilling. Sarah's grandmother literally says, I don't know what you were doing in there, but all three of you need to leave the house because something is wrong.
So the three teenagers walk into the night.
So we had to leave. And we start walking around the neighborhood. And at this point, we're all really shaken up. And Sarah turns to me and she says, right before the knock at the door, I saw a face in the closet. And then she says, also, me and Bridget have to tell you something. We watched this video earlier. I guess that day at school, they had watched a YouTube video of these people playing on a Ouija board and summoning a demon. And the demon's name was the two letters that the planchette went back and forth to.
This demon, whose name I will not say, is a well-known entity in the world of the paranormal. It thrives on mischief and causes turmoil. It is easy to conjure as it loves attention and is attracted to negativity. If you're vulnerable, it's easy to be influenced by this entity or become possessed. When Nori mentioned it was a 4-letter name, I immediately knew who she was talking about and requested that she did not say its name either. Do yourself a favor. Do not look it up.
To be honest, I was pissed. I was like, are y'all for real? You knew what was going down, watched some crazy video, and had the energy all weird, and then you want to bring me into the mix, and now we're summoning demons? Like, I thought it was going to be a cute little hangout, summon a little ghost, like, some, like, fucking Victorian lady, and then we talk for, like, 5 minutes, and then we blow the candles out, and we go to bed, Not any of this crazy shit. We like, secretly fold up the little cardboard Ouija board we made. And we take it outside because Sarah's grandmother had asked us to leave the house so she could bless the house, basically. We decide that we're going to take this cardboard Ouija board and we're going to rip it up and just, like, scatter the pieces so that, like, it's never happened. At some point, Bridget starts walking ahead of me and Sarah. And she's kind of, like, spaced out a little bit, and we think to ourselves, like, okay, she's probably just, really freaked out and needs some space. Maybe she's just, like, trying to shake it off. Your spirit guide comes through and suddenly some really scary shit happens. I'd probably be really freaked out too. So she starts walking and she's heading straight for this, it was like a cul-de-sac with a lookout point, and it looked out into the forest. And she just walks straight up to it, stands completely still, dead stop, and just is staring out into the forest. I go up to Bridget and I tap her on the shoulder. And before I tap her on the shoulder, I look at her face and she just looks so gone. She was completely just not there anymore. And the second I tapped on her shoulder, came to and looked at me and was confused and was like, what's up? What's going on? I was like, hey, dude, why are you staring out into the forest? Can we keep walking? This is weird. And she just kind of shrugged it off, was very, like, confused, but kind of shook it off and then just kept walking. That was pretty much the end of the night. We all went home after that, and we had a group chat, the three of us. And we were texting about it later that night, and it kind of already was, like, becoming a joke in a way. And it was like we just kind of didn't take it seriously. We got a good scare, and it is what it is.
But that's not how these things work.
I make the decision that I'm, like, done with this Ouija board shit. I don't want any more part in it. But Sarah and Bridget went to school and basically told a bunch of people that this happened, and everybody got really, like, invested suddenly because it's a real life ghost story. It became, like, a bit of, like, a talk of a couple groups of people were, like, invested in, like, what was happening, and they thought it was really interesting, and some people really thought it was bullshit, and some people really didn't. And so they took it and ran with it, and I remember just kind of being like, oh man, because now we're in it, and now there's got to be a follow-up.
And that's exactly how this demon works. A week later, it's Halloween, and the three girls find themselves at a small get-together, and someone brings up the board. Once again, the door is open.
So Halloween rolls around. I remember we went to another friend's house. We all met up there. It was probably like 10 or 11 of us. And we're all there, and it's me, Sarah, Bridget, and a bunch of other people. And of course, somebody's like, yo, we should do a Ouija board. And a few people decide to leave the room before we start the board. And it's me, Sarah, and Bridget with our hands on the planchette, and everybody kind of just watching around the table. I believe they had like a round table too, so it was very, very seance-y. And we're all just they're all sitting around us, and it was, the three of us kind of at the helm of the table with our hands on the board. We say hello and ask if it is a good spirit, and it goes to yes. And we ask its name, and it spells out Bridget. We tell our friends, like, this is the spirit guide that we were telling you about that says it's Bridget's spirit guide. I remember our friends kind of being like, okay, cool, it's like a spirit that says Bridget, but prove that, like, it can tell you something. We decide that we're going to take our hands off of the planchette, but other people from the group are going to put their hands on the planchette. And we're going to ask questions that only Bridget could know the answers to and see if the board can answer it. We did ask the board if it was okay if we switched the hands, because I felt like that was necessary. It said that was okay. We switched the hands and we started asking questions. I remember the question that was asked was something to do with Bridget's love life. We ask, and the board, with two other people's hands on it, spells out this person's name in full. And that was weird. But I think it was somebody that maybe she had just started talking to or something, and it was a secret, and like people didn't know who this person was. then everybody's really like, whoa, that's crazy. Like, we couldn't believe it. Genuinely, that was when it was very, very, very weird. So briefly after we asked this kind of proof question, and me, Bridget, and Sarah all had our hands back on the planchette, I believe we might have asked just another question to the spirit, Bridget. I believe it was in the midst of answering. Again, that energy shift that I spoke about the first time kind of happens. But everybody felt it instantly. The board kind of almost cuts Bridget off and goes right back to those 2 letters. And it, again, goes right back to the initials of this demon's name. Again, it's just suddenly presented itself. And, just as before, back and forth from letter to letter, faster and faster and faster every time. And I shouted goodbye because I genuinely couldn't take it anymore. And I was so frustrated and so scared. And so I shout goodbye, and I tell everybody in the room to say goodbye as well, because at this point I'd had enough. And I remember me, Sarah, and Bridget just looked at each other, and it was kind of like, well, what did we expect? Like, that was when we realized that we didn't think we could do the Ouija board at all anymore without encountering this demon.
After realizing what they were dealing with, Nori goes home to try and collect her thoughts.
I remember getting home, and the feeling of coming home after something really shocking or scary happens and feeling safe, that feeling was gone. And it was very much just a feeling of really fearful anticipation. I didn't feel relieved to be home. I didn't feel relieved to not be around the Ouija board or to not be around my friends. I didn't feel the safety or like the security that I thought that you would think you would feel in a situation like that, where, it's not like it happened in my house, but I didn't feel comfortable or safe. And it feels like you have to constantly look over your shoulder. And I don't think I slept that night, honestly.
Nori's encounters with this entity started to affect her outside of her board sessions.
Once or twice a month, I would have this dream where I would wake up, and in the dream, I would look at the clock, and that's what made it feel less like a dream and more like it was real, because the time would be different, but it was around like 3:30. I remember in the dream, I would get up and get out of my bed, walk up to the first floor balcony, because we had a basement walkout where I could see the backyards, and between the houses, you could see your backyard, your neighbor's backyard, and the street between. I would kind of just stare through the houses. Every single time I would see this like massive black orb start to go between the houses and down the backyard. I would just kind of feel myself being frozen there, watching it as it slowly got closer and closer to the house. And like that feeling of just like dread of what was to come, and seeing it from the first floor go into the basement door. And I would almost feel it come into the house, like enter the house. And the dream sequence would end with the sound of something like stomping up the basement stairs behind me. And then I would wake up in my bed.
As the effects of their sessions seeped further into their friendship, Nori became aware that one of them started to become more deeper involved with the Ouija board and becoming fixated on its messages.
Our friendship was pretty fresh at this point, but there was already some cracks in the foundation. Shortly after this Halloween incident, I found out that Bridget and Sarah were doing the board by themselves without me, because I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I never really got to hear the full story of what they talked about, but I do know that whatever Bridget, the spirit guide, quote unquote, told to real life Bridget made her honestly become a little bit obsessed. She would go to the board to ask questions about everything and to get guidance about everything all the time. It didn't seem scary to her anymore. Bridget was a bit of a mean girl, she really had a mean streak about her. She would do things to Sarah and to me that would kind of single each other out and pit each other against each other, I honestly do wonder, her consistently going back to the board like that, and just kind of the energies around and everything, it was just all very negative.
So this obsession continues. And a few weeks later, Nori, Sarah, and Bridget find themselves again at a small group gathering with requests of a Ouija board session.
There was like another kind of get together this time at Bridget's house. And it was in the basement, and we again ordered pizza. There was maybe about 10, 12 of us again. People had known that even though we hadn't done it in a while, that we were these ghost people that like did these spooky things. And so made the Ouija board. It was always like a Sharpie in the back of the pizza box and a shot glass. I tell everybody in the room, like, I don't care if we need to be respectful because I don't play with this shit lightly. Like, we can ask one question and say goodbye, and that's it.
Nori, Bridget, and Sarah put their hands on the planchette.
Yeah, so again, we start, it was just the three of us with our hands on the planchette, as always. And we start the seance, turn off the lights in the basement, and everyone's just kind of sitting quietly and listening. And we start and we say hello. And I think we got a completely different spirit this time. It kind of seemed chill. Like, it seemed like it was like a regular ghost. It was normal for once. And just like always, just the feeling in the room, feeling just nauseous and gross and just heavy, you know, mid-response or mid-conversation with said spirit, we got interrupted again, right back to the same initials. As it's speeding up between these two letters, we hear this massive bang from upstairs. Bridget's mom, she yells from upstairs and then opens the basement door so loudly, like shrieks Bridget's name.
Bridget!
And of course, we say goodbye, we yell goodbye, and close the board. Bridget runs upstairs to see what the hell is going on, and people at this point are like really freaked out. This loud noise happens. We're all sitting around confused. Her mom basically says, like, everybody has to leave. Party's over. Everyone's got to go. Like, I don't know what you're doing, but like something is really wrong.
But the night didn't end there.
All of us, I remember just going back home again, and the activity in my house at this point had really ramped up. Like, there was consistently activity in my house. I remember doors slamming all the time, lights flickering, and it was always in my own space. And that was the weird thing. Like, it didn't seem to leave my room. Smells are apparently like a big sign, and I would consistently smell like rotting eggs all the time.
Nori found that speaking sessions with this entity was starting to affect her daily existence.
I slept so poorly during this time. I remember, like, I barely slept. It was so bad. I fell behind in school. Also, I was dealing with mental health stuff, all of that family stuff too. So it was draining me in such a specific way. Like, I felt like I had no energy. I remember just depleted of everything.
Continuing to be tormented by this energy, Nori once again confronted Bridget and Sarah about their use of the board without her.
While this activity is continuing on, I remember just feeling like they weren't echoing the same frustration or exhaustion or fear that I had. And so I started to suspect that maybe Bridget and Sarah were doing the Ouija board without me. Specifically, like, also that Bridget was doing it alone, because I remember when we would do it, it just seemed like she got really like fixated on it in such a way it like consumed her almost. Like, she just needed to get more information and talk more with the spirit and know more. So I asked Sarah point blank if they were, and she told me that they were and they had been, and that it didn't seem scary anymore, and that the stuff that Bridget, the spirit guide, was saying was really like cool and helpful, and that actually Sarah's spirit guide had come through as well. So at this point, I start to think that whatever we're dealing with has been lying to us this whole time.
Nori started to suspect that this demon, disguising itself as Bridget's spirit guide, was trying to gain trust through revealing information to the three of them. And because Nori wasn't falling for it, it was hiding itself in sessions she was a part of, as to not blow its cover.
Every time we would do the board, since I had found out that the two of them were doing it without me, it had only been Bridget, the spirit guide, coming through. And the entity that had presented itself previously was nowhere to be, heard from. It like new information about Bridget, it knew information about Sarah, it knew information about me. And it felt like it was not because it was from some sort of like higher place. It felt like it was getting this information from us. It didn't feel like, oh, wow, that's so cool that you know that. It's like, how do you know that and why? This spirit has been manipulating us. I wanted to get to the bottom of it. I remember doing research on my own time at this point about demonic possession, demonic contact. And what I was reading was seriously matching up with the things I was seeing, just in terms of like behavioral changes in people.
And one of them was affected more than the others.
Bridget really changed as a person throughout this whole time. I don't know. I'm not saying anybody was possessed or anything like that happened, but definitely there was some sort of like malevolent influence, we'll say, over the actions of the people in that friend group for sure.
And it seemed to make Bridget more aggressive.
We're in Bridget's kitchen, and I think Sarah had dropped something. Bridget like kind of taps or like pushes Sarah a little bit, like, nudges her or something like that. And Sarah like nudges her back. They're just like, it was like joking around at first, like, oh, like you dropped something, whatever, like you're an asshole. And Sarah happened to kind of like push her back. And I remember Bridget straight up just like grabbed her by the throat and like held her for a second. I saw her lunge at her with such force that I was like, what the fuck? Like I was shocked that she kind of like went at her like that, It was like she just wasn't there. And you see, like, she came back and she laughed it off, just really tried to make a joke of it. I remember Sarah being really scared. Bridget thought it was just hilarious. Like, she just thought it was like, oh, come on. Like, I was just playing around.
This demon seemed to be channeling through Bridget.
I remember there was one specific time we were doing it in Bridget's garage, and it was like we were asking questions, and suddenly she just kind of looked up in this very, really, like, it was like slower than it needed to be, of like kind of just like raising her head in a very paced way, and just kind of looking straight at the garage door and saying, someone's coming. And then blowing out the candle, putting the planchette at goodbye, and like the second she like moved the board so that it wasn't in sight anymore, her mom walked into the garage. Like, we couldn't hear her walking up to the door.
Nori had had enough. She was exhausted and frightened. She decided she had to confront her friends about the reality of who they had been communicating with.
Yeah, when I eventually, I think probably around March, I kind of got the courage because the activity was still continuing, and I told Bridget and Sarah, like, hey, I think this is not what you think it is. I think we've been like lied to, basically. And I remember the second I said that, Bridget wanted to do the board again to prove me wrong. I don't know if I had outed this entity or whatever, but that's when everything changed. And from that point, it was only that spirit coming through. We couldn't get anything else. No matter how hard we tried, no matter what we did, it was like nothing else would come through. And so we do the board, and again, it comes through and makes itself known. And I remember asking point blank, has this been a lie the entire time? And the board goes to yes. And then at that point, the questions that we asked, every answer was mocking us, angry, and suddenly angry. I remember it spelt out like bitch and whore and just stuff like that, like awful words, and then would spell out things like kill and like death and just like very violent and awful and trying to scare us. This was kind of really the beginning of the end for our friendship, I think, because that's when we realized like that we were really in too deep. It's dangerous, you can't play with this stuff. We kind of decided that we wanted to find a way to get rid of this entity, basically, because we realized that whatever we had been speaking to was lying to us and just telling us whatever we wanted to hear and manipulating us into developing this like a real obsession with the Ouija board and wanted it out. We wanted it done with. I wanted the activity in my house to stop. As friends, me, Bridget, and Sarah were fighting consistently. Like there was at this point really not much good left. And so we honestly, all we wanted to do was just stop using it and be done with it. We do the Ouija board for like the one last time. We wanted questions answered. So we, at this point, had been researching a lot about occult stuff and, how to like safely engage with spirits. And so I remember asking like, who are you? And it told us that it was the devil. It told us that it was Satan, that it was Lucifer, that it was all these different beings. I remember it spelling out names that I had never heard, biblical names that when we Googled them, Goetic names that we had never heard. That I remember asking it, what do we do to make it stop? It spelled out stop, and we asked stop what? To stop being friends, first and foremost, and that we could never do the Ouija board again.
And they asked their final question to the board.
What will happen if we don't stop being friends? And it just spelled out danger. That was it. We said goodbye. We basically were like, okay, I guess we have to stop being friends. And so we didn't speak, the three of us. We stopped being friends. Things slowly returned to normal. And, I didn't mess with any of that stuff anymore. It was kind of hard, but we kind of all drifted apart. And several months after the last time that we did it, that we didn't speak. And in that time, the activity just completely stopped in my house. It was almost like this energy just festered between the three of us. And the second we kind of went our separate ways, it was like it got released into the ethers or something like that.
This kind of energy doesn't disappear. It watches. And the girls find themselves playing with fate once more.
We all decide that it's been enough time and, what could a catch-up hurt? So we decide that we're going to all go for a bike ride. And things were super, chill. It was almost the end of the school year. I remember us being like super excited about the summertime. And it was kind of like a bittersweet meeting up of friends that I guess like couldn't be friends anymore. Yeah, we all just like kind of like hung out at this plaza. Sarah biked home. Me and Bridget hung out just alone, the two of us, for a bit. And then I biked home. On my way home, I was biking home. I wasn't wearing a helmet, and I was just about to be home, and I was going through an intersection. And I went to go stand up on my bike to pedal faster, and I caught my foot on the pedal and hit the pavement head first. And I blacked out, and I was just like unconscious on the road and got a really, really, really bad concussion that actually like almost didn't like graduate that grade of high school that year because I couldn't pass my classes because of that head injury that I got. Sarah got home and had an explosive fight with her family, and I think was kicked out for a period of time. And Bridget was wanted to be a professional dancer who had foot problems, and that night she got home and had fallen and broke her foot, and it was basically the doctor had said like if she got another foot injury she wouldn't be able to dance again. And that night all three of us had like really awful shit happen, and we never hung out again. So I don't know, the board spelled out danger, and that's exactly what we found. So moral of the story, don't fuck with Ouija boards. Definitely after this, it was like things definitely shifted for me in the sense of the other side or other planes of energy and existence. Like they are real, and there's doors that you can open and you can not realize you've opened and you don't know how to close, and that can happen so quickly. And so there's a lot more respect that I've gained. I don't think that anybody should be doing a Ouija board personally, because I think there's a lot more respectful ways that you can engage with spirits. And the Ouija board is almost kind of the like esoteric equivalent to opening your front door in the middle of the night,
It wouldn't be a true Geist episode if somehow this story didn't affect Beau or I in a spooky way. I was hesitant to ever do a story on a Ouija board knowing what can come through and how it affects people. For the duration of time I worked on this episode, every night I woke up at 3 a.m. I tried to dismiss it as being psychosomatic, but what I couldn't explain is when I woke up, I had the urgency to go to my window. I would look onto the night street and see nothing. Now, I know Nori experienced the same thing, so yes, it could all be in my head, but the conjoining fact is that Nori was my neighbor. So this was all happening next door to me. So it was kind of chilling to realize we were looking down at the same row of houses, onto the same street, into the night. If you have a story you've been hiding, submit it to us at geist.podcast.com. Geist is written and directed by me, Danielle Matar. Original score and sounds by Beau Jensen. Geist web artwork is by Jake Carruthers. Special thanks goes to Nori and Sarah Hahn. Follow us on Instagram at _Geist Podcast. And don't forget to rate and subscribe to Geist on Apple Podcasts. It makes it easier for people to find us. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, sleep tight.